Your military service is nothing but a convenient lie, a pathetic excuse for running away from real family responsibilities. My sister's slick corporate attorney actually smirked as he said those words to the probate judge. Sitting beside him, my sister Brenda sneered, crossing her arms like she had already won our late grandfather's estate. She called me a coward who vanished for 8 years just to dodge hard work, leaving behind blank employment gaps and red-taped records. I didn't flinch. I sat at my table in a plain, faded jacket, saying nothing, letting them bury themselves in their own arrogance. They thought my redacted discharge paperwork meant I was an imposter. They were smiling until the chief courtroom bailiff stepped closer, caught sight of the jagged shrapnel scar peeking beneath my collar, froze dead in his tracks and snapped a trembling textbook salute. Valkyrie? The operator from Task Force 9. My name is Nora Harrison. I am 28 years old and for the past 8 years, my existence was reduced to a blank file in government archives. To the rest of the world I was just a ghost who walked away at 20 and never looked back. When I stepped into the Oak Ridge County Courthouse on a rainy Tuesday morning, I wasn't wearing a uniform or medals. I had on a faded olive-green utility jacket, worn denim and scuffed work boots. My hair was pulled back into a simple, tight knot. I didn't come to cause a scene. I came because my grandfather, Arthur Harrison, had passed away 3 weeks prior, and he was the only soul in this town who ever truly understood why I had to leave. Grandpa Arthur was a tough, quiet man who worked 50 acres of apple orchard with his bare hands. When I signed my enlistment papers, everyone in my family screamed that I was throwing my future into the dirt. Only Grandpa pressed an old brass compass into my palm and told me to always find my way back. Now, walking into the cold marble corridor of Department 4B, I saw my older sister, Brenda. She was leaning against the mahogany bench, draped in an expensive tailored trench coat, clutching a designer leather purse. Next to her stood Marcus Kane, a high-priced corporate probate attorney known for shredding estate claims. The moment Brenda saw me, her lips curled into a smirk of pure disgust. "Look what dragged itself in," Brenda said loudly, making sure the clerk heard. "You've got nerve showing your face here, Nora. You abandoned this family for nearly a decade, and now you think you can just wander in and claim half of Grandpa's land." The heavy oak doors of Department 4B groaned open, cutting off Brenda's sneer before I could respond. We filed into the austere courtroom. I took a seat alone at the respondent's table, resting my hands flat against the polished wood. Across the aisle, Brenda settled in beside Marcus Kane, who theatrically arranged a thick stack of manila folders, smoothing his tie with arrogant precision. Judge Miller, an elderly man with sharp gray eyes and decades of probate fatigue etched into his face, adjusted his glasses and called the matter of Arthur Harrison's estate to order. Kane didn't waste a single second. He sprang to his feet, buttoning his suit jacket with a sharp, practiced motion. "Your Honor," Kane began, his voice booming with rehearsed indignation. "This is an open and shut case of gross abandonment. For 8 long years my client Brenda Harrison single-handedly managed her grandfather's well-being, while the respondent Nora Harrison simply vanished off the face of the earth." He picked up a single sheet of paper and waved it dismissively toward the bench. When we requested the respondent's proof of residency and employment records to justify any legitimate absence, she handed our office this absurd, heavily redacted document claiming supposed military service. Kane let out a dry, theatrical chuckle that echoed through the quiet room. "Every line that matters is blacked out. No base assignments, no civilian tax filings, no commander signatures. It's an insult to this court." Brenda leaned forward, nodding vigorously, dabbing a non-existent tear from her cheek. "The truth, Your Honor," Kane declared, turning his cold gaze directly onto me, "is that Nora Harrison was nothing more than an irresponsible runaway drifting between transient odd jobs. This redacted record is a laughable forgery, a convenient lie cooked up to steal her sister's rightful inheritance." Marcus Kane gave a satisfied nod and gestured toward his client. "I call Brenda Harrison to the stand to illuminate the reality of Arthur Harrison's final years." Brenda rose gracefully, smoothing down her designer skirt, walking to the witness box with measured, delicate steps. She placed her hand on the Bible, took the oath with a tremulous voice, and turned her wide, sorrowful eyes toward Judge Miller. "Brenda," Kane began gently, pacing before the railing, "tell the court what life was like maintaining the family farm while your sister was absent." It was an impossible burden, Brenda said, her voice catching with theatrical precision. While Nora ran away to live without responsibilities, I sacrificed everything. I visited Grandpa every single weekend. I managed his medical appointments, hired his caretakers, and drained my own personal savings just to keep the orchard afloat. She reached into her handbag, pretending to dab her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Grandpa was heartbroken by Nora's silence, Brenda continued, her tone sharpening with bitter resentment. Toward the end, when his dementia advanced, he realized who actually loved him. He signed over the entirety of the estate because he knew I was the only one who cared. Nora only returned because she smelled money. I kept my hands folded, watching her closely. I knew Brenda. I knew the way her left index finger tapped against her knee whenever she told a high-stakes lie. Her story sounded flawless to a stranger, but the cracks were already there. She claimed she drained her personal savings, yet she had arrived in a brand-new $70,000 luxury SUV. She claimed Grandpa had advanced dementia, yet his hand-penned letters had reached my secure military postbox with crystal-clear lucidity right up until the week he passed. He thought I was helpless. She thought my silence was surrender. Judge Miller set his pen down, his expression hardening as he looked over the top of his spectacles at me. "Ms. Nora Harrison," the judge said, his tone gravelly and stern. "In light of counsel's claims regarding this redacted service record, I need you to approach the bench and present valid state identification and your original discharge documentation." "I'd be happy to, Your Honor," I said quietly, rising to my feet. As I unzipped the collar of my olive jacket to reach for the inner pocket of my shirt, the movement shifted the fabric aside. It exposed the thick, jagged line of a shrapnel scar running from the hollow of my throat up behind my left ear, alongside the matte black titanium medical ID tag around my wrist. The chief courtroom bailiff, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with a silver buzz cut and a row of service ribbons on his uniform lapel, stepped forward to escort me to the bench. His eyes dropped to my wrist tag, then snapped up to the distinctive scar on my neck. Suddenly, the bailiff stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened in absolute shock. The color drained from his weathered face, and his chest heaved as if he had just seen a ghost walk out of a firestorm. "Master Sergeant Miller?" the judge asked, frowning at the abrupt hesitation. "Is something wrong?" The bailiff didn't answer the judge. Instead, his posture locked into rigid, textbook military precision. His heels clicked together on the polished linoleum, and his right hand snapped up to his eyebrow in a crisp, trembling salute. "Valkyrie?" Miller's voice shook, barely louder than a whisper, but it cut through the silent room like a blade. "Captain Harrison. Call sign Valkyrie?" The Tier 1 sniper who pulled my son's trapped convoy out of the valley in the Euphrates. Marcus Kane let out a sharp, dismissive bark of laughter. "Your Honor, this is completely out of order." A court bailiff interrupting a formal probate hearing to salute a runaway drifter based on a scar. "Quiet, Mr. Kane," Judge Miller commanded, his voice dropping into dangerous authority. He turned to the bailiff. "Thomas, explain yourself." "Immediately." Bailiff Miller lowered his trembling hand from the salute but stayed locked at rigid attention. "Judge, with all due respect to this court, Nora Harrison's record isn't redacted because she's a liar," Miller said, his eyes never leaving mine. "It's redacted because she operated under Special Operations Command. She was the ghost of Task Force 9. In 2022, my boy David's 4-man reconnaissance unit was pinned down in a rocky gorge outside Hasaka, taking heavy fire with zero air support. Captain Harrison held the entire ridge alone for 14 hours in the freezing dark until the extraction birds could land. She pulled every single boy out alive, took a shrapnel burst to the neck, and refused evacuation until the last man was loaded. The courtroom went dead silent. Brenda's mouth opened slightly, all color draining from her cheeks. Judge Miller leaned forward, staring at me with deep contemplation before picking up his desk phone. "I am ordering an immediate 15-minute recess to contact the Regional Department of Defense Liaison Office directly from my chambers." When the judge returned, the heavy silence in Department 4B was suffocating. He sat down slowly and opened a newly received sealed file. "The Department of the Army just unsealed Captain Nora Harrison's financial and service verification," Judge Miller said, his voice ringing through the room. "Not only did Captain Harrison serve 8 years of distinguished high-risk active duty, receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, but for the entire duration of her deployment, 80% of her combat pay was wired directly every month into Arthur Harrison's family orchard trust account. I opened my leather satchel and pulled out a thick binder of certified bank records, laying them flat on the counsel table before the judge. Your Honor, I spoke, my voice calm, steady and clear. Over the past 8 years, my active duty pay transfers into Grandpa's trust totaled just over $410,000. That money was intended to maintain the farm equipment, pay the property taxes, and ensure Arthur Harrison had the best private in-home medical care available. I turned slowly to face Brenda, whose hands were now trembling violently in her lap. When I returned home 3 weeks ago, I found the trust account balance sitting at less than $1,200. Furthermore, I discovered that 3 months before Grandpa passed, while he was heavily medicated in the intensive care unit, a revised will was drafted and filed by Mr. Marcus Kane. I walked the certified audit directly to the bench. The signature on that revised deed does not belong to Arthur Harrison. It was signed via an unauthorized electronic power of attorney issued to Brenda Harrison, using funds diverted directly from my combat pay to retain Mr. Kane's private legal services. Judge Miller flipped through the financial forensic report, his expression darkening with fury. He glared over his glasses directly at Marcus Kane. Mr. Kane, Judge Miller said, his voice dangerously low. Did you knowingly file a deed transfer utilizing an unverified power of attorney while the decedent was incapacitated in intensive care? Kane's arrogant composure completely disintegrated. His face turned a sickly shade of crimson, beads of sweat forming along his receding hairline. Your Honor, my client assured me, Kane stammered, pulling at his stiff collar. Save it for the State Bar Disciplinary Board, Mr. Kane. Judge Miller slammed his gavel down. Because I am referring both you and your client to the county prosecutor for grand larceny and systemic probate fraud. The sharp crack of Judge Miller's gavel echoed through Department 4B like a thunderclap, sealing the fate of the room. I hereby declare the contested will entirely null and void due to proven fraudulent execution, Judge Miller ruled, his voice brooking no argument. Full, unencumbered ownership of the Harrison farm and estate is awarded to Captain Nora Harrison, per the original valid trust. Furthermore, Brenda Harrison is ordered to make full financial restitution of the $400,000 embezzled from this trust within 90 days, or face immediate criminal indictment. Brenda slumped into her chair, burying her face in her hands as silent, panicked sobs shook her shoulders. Beside her, Marcus Kane frantically packed his briefcase with trembling fingers, refusing to look anyone in the eye. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a single word to either of them. I simply closed my satchel, zipped my jacket and turned toward the exit. At the back of the courtroom, Bailiff Thomas Miller waited by the heavy oak doors. As I approached, he extended a calloused hand. Thank you, Captain, Miller said quietly, a deeply emotional warmth in his eyes. For my son. And for standing tall in here today. Just doing my job, Sergeant, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Tell David I said hello. 10 minutes later, I was driving my old pickup truck up the gravel lane of the orchard. The rain had stopped, giving way to golden afternoon sunlight breaking through the clouds. I stepped out onto the porch of the farmhouse, pulled Grandpa Arthur's brass compass from my pocket, and looked out over the 50 acres of quiet, blooming apple trees. The battle was over. The truth was spoken. And I was finally home.